The experience of creating this channel has been nothing short of amazing. Nearly 100,000 subscribers. I thought I'd never get to this. Thing is, I'd like to break that 100k mark before the end of October. So all you need to do is subscribe, tell your friends to subscribe, and ding that bell. You're gonna really want to ding that bell, trust me. Before I begin, a caveat. From the depths of my heart, you don't need any of this stuff. A microphone, a computer, headphones, or a pair of speakers is all you need. But I've been in London, and whilst the cat's away, the mice have been playing, and the mice, in this case, are Yellow Technology. I've set them some new specifications for my studio because of some work that I'm just about to begin. And this is the thing about studios, they're living organisms. To think that you'll set yourself up and plumb everything in and hard solder everything, and that's you set for life, well, I think that that is a fool's errand. You've got to see them as these constantly shifting, evolving spaces. So, time for a tour. Welcome to the shed, or welcome back if you've been here before. What I thought I'd do is just do a complete tour. Some of you may have seen this stuff already, but there's been a lot of upgrades if you have, and tweaks to my workflow which you may find interesting. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of work round this way, starting with the curtains. This is actually just a big old pane of glass, which is terrible for the acoustics. So one of the reasons I have the curtain is for the acoustics, but also there's a massive amount of glare that it creates. It's a real sun trap this place is in. This is a shed, a proper shed, by the way. I bought it from a company called Green Retreats. It's great, you just do it online and they come and deliver it. And it's not soundproofed, so you can hear rain when it's raining. You can hear the dawn chorus. I've not had any complaints yet from my neighbours, and I do cane it monitoring wise. This Robbie and I call Story Corner. Sometimes we film here. I'll also do all my emails here and stuff like that. This shed was just amazing during lockdown. It enabled me to continue coming to work and to kind of get away from the family when I wasn't helping with the homeschooling, which I didn't do much of, to be fair, and to be able to kind of stand here and have all the meetings with the rest of the team was a real relief. And it's basically a Victorian draftsman's table, which you can adjust the height and the pitch of. I'm not going to adjust that because it's got Robbie's cup of coffee there. Then we've got my kind of out of the box modular stroke piano stroke electric piano area. This rack, well, it can be commanded by this polyend sec, which is a very aesthetically pleasing device to use, but also we do have the power to run it from MIDI as well. I've made a promise that no more cases, and once this is full, it's strictly one out, one in. Great stuff about good quality outboard is its resale value is worthy of consideration. So I'll probably sell some of these on if I want to try some new stuff. On the whole, use pretty much everything, I'd say, save for these drummy bits here. So these will probably be the first to go, which is convenient because it'll clear a lot of space. New addition to the studio, Yellow Tech, whilst I was down in London last week, came and did a breakout box, and we've got 2 microphone ties, which are going to be really useful for modular inputs, and a set of headphone outs, which is great. My trusty Shimmel C114 Junior, which is really like their absolute entry level. There's just something about it. It's the Fender 15-watt tweed of pianos for me. It just records really well for drama, and there's something particularly divine about the Celeste pedal, which is my somewhat feeble justification for a pair of M149s Neumanns, which are permanently situated here. I get so much use out of this, both sampling for piano book, but also from scores like Poirot to, I did an entire episode of Inside Number 9, just me on this piano on my Todd, no click, nothing. Minky, I have a passion for bad taxidermy, but my wife won't have it in the house, so this is my little kind of cave where I can have these monstrosities. Beautiful Mutron biphase that my wife bought me, and one of my favourite synths, the Moog Sirin. And round here to my Wurlitzer, which I call Colonel William Wurlitzer. I bought this for 200 quid about 15 years ago. I've got so much use out of it, and I've seen what they fetch these days, and it's eye-watering. Pedalboard. This was used extensively this year, largely on the Solstice tape orchestra, or cassette orchestra I think it's called, where we used this ad nauseum. I also used it on a film recently as well, but it's basically what I've decided to do is I'm going to get it properly boxed and properly connected up by a professional. If anyone knows of someone who can do that in the Glasgow, Edinburgh area, I'd be much appreciated. Failing that, if you can recommend anyone else, that'd be much appreciated. A lot of you ask what these stands are. These are latch lakes. They don't droop too much. They're absolutely fantastic. Once you lock stuff in, it really stays locked in. So these are great for miking large instruments. However, they're very clumsy to use and you find yourself jerking and things popping up and down. I'd be very nervous about using a latch lake around, say, a violin or something like that. They're very clunky to use. So these are great as fixed position mics, but not ones that you want to move around because, as I say, when you lock them, they really do lock. So moving around here, I'll probably maybe take you through the new camera system that we've had installed. So this is a Lumix BGH1. Basically, the camera that Robbie's currently using at the moment is a GH5S, which are excellent in low light. This is ostensibly the same camera, but in a cube form, and I've got them powered via Ethernet, the connector that just keeps giving. So that's PoE plus that it requires. And then, unfortunately, it doesn't spit out SDI as 4K, only as 1080. So we've got HDMI out, and Yellowtech have beautifully set this up. These are great. You can adjust all of these pivot points with a simple, this one simple cog here. So what that all does is go into this series of Blackmagic boxes. So you insert the cards in there. We've now got a fourth box because I've got an extra camera. So we've got our keys camera, we've got our face camera, and we've got our new overhead camera. So basically we record direct into these. What's great about this system is you can call up the different cameras here, and so I can confidently focus. I can't tell you how many times I've had to cycle back from Leith to do an entire hour-long tutorial that I'd already done that morning because of soft focusing. So that's camera 2, so that's this one. And then we've got a new one directly above the keyboard, which will give us our new overhead shot, because I don't like the somewhat unflattering back flab view of me in camera 3, which is this one here. Robbie will tend to edit starting on my face, and then I'll start talking about something that's on the screen. So we use this to step into the screen, and then the screen comes out of a separate HDMI into this box here. So this is a piece of local furniture, and I call it Tape Corner, and whatever I'm fiddling with at the moment. So a couple of tape echoes, this new Australian one made by EchoFix, who I believe he's the top fixer-upper of these chorus echoes. So this is a modern iteration of an old classic. And my trusty Porter 1, it's not the exact same one as I had when I was a kid, but it's the same model. So it's just really weird whenever I look at it to think of the journey that I've been on since starting to use these things. We've got our lamps now properly attached to the ceiling. Something that was really frustrating me is there were so many tripods everywhere, and I'd kick them around all the time, and then I'd get to Leith and everything would be framed badly. Something I haven't mentioned before is air conditioning. It's absolute. In these sheds, there's really no way of the air getting in or out. Actually, much to my chagrin, I once did a fart, just the once, in this room, and honestly it lingered for about 3 days. So air conditioning, really important, not just for farts, but because this stuff generates a lot of heat and there's really nowhere for it to go, so this drags it out. I don't know if, Rob, if you can fit down here, around here, but there's my new Mac Pro, which is an absolute beast. It basically, the only way I can describe it is it just does what it's told and never complains. I've got a headphone amp here, which is a DAC1, and that speaks to my computer via AES EBU. This computer here is what I record whatever I'm playing out of the computer and my main voiceover microphone. That comes in via this RME Babyface. The reason for doing it on separate computers is sometimes I like to be demonstrating both on Pro Tools and on Logic, and basically by taking everything that's coming out of the computer, that's the easiest way of doing it. Also, it's I've got two ins, one from the my summing mixer, which I'll show you in a sec, and one which is basically ADAT light pipe. So it's a digital signal, so when I'm demonstrating libraries and stuff, there's no AD or DA conversion, or the other way around. I've got a new solid state fader thingy. That is because I've made a huge investment in making this a mix space, which is what I'll get onto in a minute. Is talking about the surround sound setup that I've now got in here. Basically, I like to give as much time to the mix as humanly possible. It's part of the production process for me. And what I don't like doing is leaving my family for long periods of time. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, there aren't any professional grade 5.1 studios in Scotland, certainly not with monitoring that I can trust. So I took it upon myself to build one here. I've got a guest house, so if engineers want to come up and mix it up here, or I use someone local, we're able to do it in here. And I have to say, I'm absolutely delighted with the sound of this room. The Yellowtech job that's been done on all of the sound insulation, is that the right word, or sound treatment, acoustic treatments, is just absolutely amazing. And we'll get to another thing in a minute that also helps the sound. So we've got our 6 speakers, which is left, centre, right, left surround, right surround. So I don't know if you can see down there, Robbie, there's a whopping great Dynaudio sub. Probably a little bit too big for this room, actually. So I might think about getting a smaller one. Those are all controlled by the Dangerous remote control. We've got our 6 controls there. And my big screen, which I've spoken about in the video linked above, the advantages of working on a single screen. I see a lot of people working on 2 screens, which basically means you're staring at a crack all day, and I'd rather not stare at a crack all day. So yeah, big old screen, and let's just have a look at the spec of the Mac. It's monstrous. So it's 28 2.5 gigahertz cores and 384 gigabytes of RAM. And it's also got an AMD Radeon Pro 580X 8 gigabyte graphics card. It's one of those painful investments because it just does what it's told. It's nothing special. It just doesn't complain, ever. New edition, Deckard's Dream Mark II. I would call it an extraordinary synth. What I love about it is it's not like any synth I've used. I believe it's kind of based on the CS80, but it's the quality of the presets, which is brilliant. And it's very unexpected because it doesn't really behave like other synths I've used. It has kind of similarities to an organ, really, as well as a synth. But this is something that we used extensively down in London recently, so it earned its keep. The Electro Voice RE20 is my chosen mic for tutorials. It has a very kind of American radio show sound to it, and don't ask engineers in Germany what they call it out there. It's very rude. Moving on to my summing mixer. When I'm in 5.1, I don't use this. This is a stereo summing mixer, the 8804. This is actually just the controller because the main head there, the main brain, is here. So I've got 2 outboard reverbs. The Bricasti, which I think is great for pop. So you can see it's not on at the moment. I'm not using it at the moment because it has a transparency that I think doesn't muddy your scores, whereas TC6000 surround, it's a real thickening agent. However, I'm not going to be using this on my current projects because I'm collaborating with other people who don't have the outboard, but also it's a nightmare to stem if you're using outboard reverbs. Moving along is the Mixer King, which is a 6-track guitar mixer, so you can get more than one guitar into your amp, and it was owned and used by Jimi Hendrix. Basically, if I ever want something to sound 60s and a bit crap, I just put it in there. You can totally trust what you get back because it just cuts all of the bandwidth and it sounds terrible. So I've managed to get it down from 3 racks to 2. I've maxed out the amount of outboard that I need. There's a few spaces this is going to go because I don't use it, but everything else is stuff that I use frequently. So we've got my trusty 1073 DPA. My other one totally broke and they couldn't fix it. So I've replaced it with a 1073 DPX, which is a bit more fancy. The reason I went for that is I heard my wife's vocals on her latest album, Heart Shaped Scars, and I was just blown away by the quality of her vocals, and it was a combination of our U67 and this preamp, so I plumped for one of them. The Neve, as I mentioned before, then I've got two System 500 racks with some classic stuff in, SSL, API, BAE, SSL, some more SSL stuff here, a couple of Neves, and these Margs, which are really quite unique unto themselves. They've got this air frequency, which is just stunning. TG1 limiter is my, if I want to just tickle something to tape, I'll use that. And then these are very much my sound better boxes. So we've got a Manley Massive Passive, which is the only EQ that I'm comfortable putting on strings. And I've compared it to the UAD versions, and I don't think they sound the same at all. And I think it's got valves in and all of that kind of loveliness. And then I'll stick it through the Very limiter, which again is a very musical limited compressor. I do love the Neve 33609. Tried to buy one when I moved into the shed, but they couldn't make any at that time. So this was the closest contender. And finally, once it's been through the Sound Better box, it goes into the Crane Song AD converter, which has all sorts of lovely tapey stuff and sounds absolutely gorgeous. This is the brain for the Bricasti. And then the second thing that makes this room sound incredible is the Trinov. And it really is life-changing. It's not cheap, particularly the 5.1 version. The minute they switched it on, I just was like, well, you're never, ever taking this off me. It makes imperfect rooms sound better, so you don't get all sorts of horrible low standing waves and all of that kind of stuff. You could just hear everything. That's what's extraordinary about it. I won't go into the Lexicon Vortex because I don't use it. It was recommended by one of the subscribers to this channel, and I can see its charm, but it's just, I much prefer to use this multi-effects unit, which is kind of an amp simulator by Fractal Audio Systems, but I've got so much use out of this. This is my sound card, Symphony IO, and work at 48K. My favourite piece of outboard, which I do use a heck of a lot, is this Overstair. Again, video linked above, me using this. What is great about it, it's three effects that are in parallel. So you can distort, massively crunchy compress, and filter without losing the original signal. So you mix them all in, so you can clip the top off it, but still have the tops on it with its parallel signal. So it works really well to make amazing sounding drum loops. Culture Vulture is the best distortion unit in the world ever, maximum saturation. Just put a sine wave through that and see what it does. I have a lot of stuff that's mono, and the Dimension D is a vintage piece of kit, which is basically a chorus box. It doesn't sound like chorus, it just makes stuff really stereo in a way that is vintage and 80s, and I like it. Here's the TC6000 brains, and still have to boot, I think it's Windows, something like Windows 95 boots off this floppy drive here. So one of the problems with this new surround setup is that I'm going to be banging my head on this. So if you see me with little welts on my head, you know what it's from. We're thinking actually of getting some chalk to chalk up scalps, the number of scalps it gets. I may have to put some foam on there. But it's just great to be permanently set up for 5.1 now. So this is my vintage synth collection. I don't think there's been any additions to this, but I will take you through it. And my daughter, when I was homeschooling her and we were doing music lessons in here, said, "Dad, see all of these synths? Do you actually use them? I've never seen you play them." And I was like, oh, never a truer word said. They are absolutely fantastic. I've really kind of wheedled them down to pretty much my favourites. And what I have been absolutely staggered by is I made a rule I was never going to spend more than £300 on a vintage piece of kit. And I bought these between 10 and 15 years ago. And I've looked at how much they're worth now, and it's just staggering. Something that I truly believe in is never MIDI converting synths that don't have MIDI. It's like pimping a vintage Fender, if you know what I mean. I think there's something that needs to be preserved about not only their form factor and how they work, but also the way in which you use them. And I think pimping that, for me, as a purist, is a bit of a mistake. JX3P, which does have MIDI,
is my favourite crap synth. It's kind of just when Roland started going a bit crap. When you listen to these presets, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. This is my favourite Roland, which is the Jupiter 4. I think it's not as popular as it could be because it looks a bit crap. It looks a bit like an organ, but I think it's one of the last brilliantly made Rolands, because if you skip down to the Jupiter 6, there wasn't a Jupiter 5, it suddenly gets all a bit plastic and digital. If I was to get rid of a keyboard, it would probably be that one, and I've just got to find something that merits being a part of this collection to replace it with. We've got digital is the new analog, a Prophet VS, which is a digital vector synthesizer, and has a very famous preset in there that I think is called Film Score, and film scorers, composers used it on their film scores. And finally, the classic Juno 6, again, no MIDI. I think was it the Juno 60 that had MIDI? And you'll see it's got a lovely chorus here, which is based on the same circuitry as in the Dimension D over there. Don't know why that's there, not a fan of Beethoven. Korg MS-20, it's an original vintage one, full size. It's taught me so much about the value of having more than one oscillator. Olaf Arnolds has one of these, which is rotted, and I don't know what he's done to rot his, but it seems to be in quite good nick. Roland SH-101, which has a very specific sound to it, and you'll be very lucky if that F sounds like it's in the same key as that F. So it's a bit tuney, but has a very, very distinct sound. This is actually electric piano, or rather it's an electric piano bass, the Fender Rhodes bass, made famous by Ray Manzarek of The Doors. The Doors didn't have a bass player, so he used to play this, the organist, with his left hand. I found out something fascinating about Fender Rhodes. So when Fender bought the Rhodes company, they didn't actually like the sound of the electric pianos, so they didn't want to release them commercially, but what they saw a real future in was bass keyboards. So this was actually released 10 years before the first Fender Rhodes full-size electric keyboard came out, which is why you saw the Doors playing these in the 1960s, but the Fender Rhodes didn't really make an appearance into the songbook until the 1970s. Think of all of those Ray Charles classics were actually done on Wurlitzers, not Rhodes. Nagra, I haven't really got much use out of it. It's fully functional, but I have it because it is quite simply, I think, the most beautiful piece of industrial design ever. Down here we have the original Roland vocoder, and then I replaced my Moog Voyager simply because I just saw it in every studio I went into with a Moog Prodigy, and this is just great doing that super fat Moog low bass stuff. This needs to be plugged into my rack unit. It's a great virtual tape thing. This is an incomplete bit. Basically, I've separated my Mooger Fugas off from my main pedal board, and we just need to set this up so it feeds into my patch bay. Right, last but not least, Dave, aka the Colossus. He earned his keep the other day. We took him down to London, and I can't wait to show you what I did with it. It's basically, it's a reminder that modular synths comes from telephone exchange technology, because it sounds like something made by a telephone exchange. I've never heard filters sound like that. Good? I don't know, just utterly different. And that's the Shed. As I said before, you don't need any of this stuff. It's a great joy to be able to collect it. It's a great joy to be able to use it. It's inspirational. Don't feel that not having a setup like this is giving you any disadvantage at all. This is just for inspiration for an old codger like me. And it is, to a certain degree, a degree of validation. You come in and you look around and you go, what a lovely place to work. And it's great to be in this very fortunate position. I'm also really lucky to have Spitfire Audio, because I really do make them earn their rent by making sampled instruments out of them. So if there's anything you'd like me to focus in on specifically, put them in the comments down below. I do read them. I think the next vlog is going to be about 5.1 and how to work in this format. I think we're going to be using surround formats increasingly in the forthcoming years and decades. Thanks as always for watching to the end, and do subscribe if you haven't done already. Ding that bell to be notified. It's going to be really, really worth your while. And let's try and get this channel across the 100K subscribers mark before the end of October. If we do that, then I'm going to spring something mental on the chaps at Spitfire. And I think you'll be very, very happy. Right, one of those for Yellow Technology linked in the video description down below. See you next time.